Campus chaos erupts across the country. Will it hurt Joe Biden in November? And will the frat bros actually save our nation? We'll talk about that. Plus, Sarah Huckabee Sanders leading the charge to protect women in sports. Title IX is now the new battleground. Who's going to win that one? Also, Speaker Johnson under fire. Will Marjorie Taylor Greene pull the trigger to vacate the speakership? You'll hear from the speaker himself, and you'll hear from our panel. This week's roundtable includes the national spokesman for the Association of Mature American Citizens, Robert Charles, plus the vice president of Americans for Prosperity, Akash Chougule, and Townhall columnist and Capitol Hill reporter, Matthew Foldi. We're brought to you by our friends at AFP and AMAC. I'm Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry. It's time for the roundtable. Will she or won't she? Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene this week promised to take up the motion to vacate for Speaker Johnson next week. Is this the right time to do that, though? And what does the speaker think about it? Well, luckily, we know exactly what the speaker thinks about it because he appeared on Salem News Channel's This Week on the Hill, and he addressed it head on. Here's Speaker Johnson.
This week, the Democrats said they would not be a part of facilitating the chaos that Marjorie Taylor Greene is proposing by moving a motion to vacate the chair. Your reaction to that?
Well, it surprised me. I've not had conversation, certainly haven't requested the assistance of anyone, but I'm encouraged that there are grown-ups in the room who in both parties who understand that these are very serious times. We don't have time for the circus atmosphere of Congress. Right. We have to get serious work done. The last time the chair was vacated, everybody will remember back in October, Congress was closed for 3 weeks. You can't operate without a speaker. And the idea that we would want to go through that again is so dangerous. I mean, imagine China moving on Taiwan while the House is closed, right. Or, one of these wars escalating. We can't do anything.
So could this be, I mean, you're a nice guy, Mr. Speaker, but could this be more about disarming Marjorie Taylor Greene than it is about propping up Mike Johnson? Because she's essentially holding every other member hostage in that body.
She's attempting to. I don't even say her name. I try not to pay her much attention. The whole objective here is to get attention. And it's a very unfortunate thing when the threshold was lowered on the motion to vacate, where any single member could bring the motion to remove a speaker at any time. It's allowed for this absurdity, and we won't have the House held hostage. I think reasonable people want to move forward.
That's what I read into this. That there is significant issues facing our country, and there are some that say, look, we're just not going to play these political games.
And that, of course, is the host of This Week on the Hill. That's Tony Perkins from Family Research Center. Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. Akash, let's start with you. I mean, he does have a point. At this critical time, especially in an election year, the House will grind to a halt again. Frankly, I'm kind of okay with them not meddling with my life, but it also speaks of Republicans' ability to lead. So what do you think this is going to lead to?
Larry, it isn't just about the House grinding to a halt. It's that Mike Johnson does not deserve to be vacated. As conservatives, we couldn't dream of having a speaker like Mike Johnson. Anyone who doesn't think Speaker Johnson and his staff are movement conservatives has absolutely no idea what they are talking about. It's not just the challenges facing our country. It's not just a paralyzed Congress. It's that we're lucky to have Mike Johnson as speaker. Have they gotten every decision right? Of course not. But there's a reason that nobody else could get the number of votes necessary to become speaker other than Speaker Johnson. And so what's unfortunate is that we're paralyzed in this moment where you have serious lawmakers like Mike Johnson trying to play offense where the House can do so, trying to elevate the crises that President Biden has created, draw a clear contrast. And then at the same time, you have others, unfortunately, just a very small number in the House who are more focused on getting retweeted and doing small dollar fundraising. It's an unfortunate circumstance. Speaker Johnson is very gracious the way in which he handles this stuff. But let's be very clear. Ted Cruz, Jim Jordan, President Trump, the leaders of today's Republican Party have made clear that they stand with Mike Johnson. And most importantly, Larry, the group that has made most clear that they stand with Mike Johnson are Republican voters across this country. Mike Johnson has the highest approval of any national Republican in the country right now. There's a reason for that, which is that he's a movement conservative. This motion to vacate is a distraction, and it's wrong.
Yeah, Robert Akash makes a pretty good point there. Also, the Freedom Caucus, I think it's worth noting, has said they will not support this either. So what do you think's really at play here then from Marjorie Taylor Greene's perspective?
I was talking to people yesterday on the Hill. I worked for two speakers, and this is the tightest margin anybody has ever had, probably in history. I mean, when we were with Gingrich and Hastert, we had 20 votes, and that looked like very tight. Three quick points. One, I think there's a backroom deal going on here. I think this is really a discussion about leverage for things that she wants. It's bad when someone picks up a bat in a crystal shop, but that's what's going on. The second thing is, I think one call from Trump would end all of this. I think if he said, "Hey, Marjorie, let's get back in the box for a minute. We got bigger things to work on here." And the third thing is, nobody, I think, in their right mind, including her, wants to see a Democrat speaker. But to be frank, coming back to that one vote margin, we could see a Democrat speaker if you play your cards wrong here. So I think people, wiser minds and leveler heads, probably ought to prevail, and I think they will.
Well, I'll tell you, Robert, if somebody knows about a backroom deal, it'll be Matt Foldi, because he covers the Hill, and these congressmen, they tell him things on and off the record. What do you think, Mr. Foldi? Is there a backroom deal? Especially considering you got to love the speaker. I won't even say her name. That's some pretty good shade.
Which I think is smart, because ultimately this is basically good for the same two groups of people as the situation that got us here was, right? I mean, remember, what do you call a 95%? Now, I went to the University of Chicago, where 97%, where we deflate grades like there's no tomorrow. That would probably be like a B- at U Chicago. But normally that's an A+. And Kevin McCarthy regularly had 97% of House Republicans voting for him. And then, of course, he was ousted to the benefit of the bank accounts in the campaign coffers of a handful of Republicans, and also to every single Democrat in America. It made Republicans obviously look incompetent. Now, those same groups benefit from really this massive waste of time. Marjorie Taylor Greene has been having this sort of proposal floated for weeks at this point and done nothing with it, because everyone realizes it's not actually going to work. Now, I wish it were true that no Republican in Congress wants Hakeem Jeffries to be speaker. But some of these people who are frustrated with Mike Johnson have absurdly said that one of the most conservative speakers of any of our lifetimes is basically indistinguishable from Hakeem Jeffries. Obviously, these people should spend more time in the universe that we live in, because obviously that's not true at all. I don't think that, there's certainly no backroom deal with Democrats from Mike Johnson to say, hey, can you guys, bail me out? Some of them have said that they'll do so. But I don't even know if there's a backroom deal with Marjorie Taylor Greene, if it would be effective, because there have been out of backroom deals. He made her an impeachment manager in the Mayorkas trial, which he didn't need to do. And we saw what that got him. It got him nothing.
Yeah. And Matt, let's quickly go around here, because I will say this. I think that there are Republicans in this majority who are at the very least much more comfortable in the minority fighting against a Democrat leadership than they are sort of carrying the burden of majority and working to keep a coalition together. But let me ask you, because Robert raised it, Trump can call this off right now. One phone call, one text message, it's over. So we'll start with you, Matt. Do you think Trump intervenes and stops this?
I remember he spoke next to Mike Johnson a couple of weeks ago when this was kind of bubbling up. So, and the RNC chairman, Trump's handpicked RNC chairman, Michael Whatley, said he met with Marjorie Taylor Greene and said, hey, let's cut this off. So if he hasn't already basically tipped his hand, maybe he'll formally do it soon. But, keep an eye out for next week. This is basically going to be quashed, is what it looks like. Whether or not Trump formally says, hey, chill out, we'll find out when he decides.
Akash, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Foldy's right. He has made very clear that he supports Mike Johnson as speaker. And let's make one more thing clear. We're in the situation of the narrow majority. It's exactly this kind of clown behavior that resulted in having such a narrow majority to begin with. And so rather than trying to vacate the most conservative speaker in our lifetimes, let's stop whining from the cheap seats and actually start to help grow the Republican majority. That's where the focus should be, of a unified Republican Party.
Clown behavior. You guys are unplugged this week. I love it. Robert, what do you think? You'll have the final word.
Yeah, no, I think he's got a great point. And I think at the end of the day, this is actually more about whether the Republicans think we're a mature party worth another 20 or 30 seats in November. And if we misbehave right now, we're going to look as bad as the other folks, and it'll look stupid.
It's unanimous here on the roundtable. We put our little petty differences aside and we came up with a consensus. See that, House Republicans? You can do that too.
It wasn't that hard.
We had some incredible, beautiful, patriotic, inspiring scenes on college campuses this week. No, not the moments where the dirtbag pro-Hamas terrorist sympathizers were dragged out of their beds by the California Highway Patrol, although that was beautiful too. No, I'm talking about the revenge of the frat boys. Take a look.
What's that?
Take a shower! Take a shower! We want some! We want some! We want some! That our flag was still there. Oh, save us that star-spangled banner yet wave. USA! 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 USA!
Why'd you tear down that poster?
Supporting terrorists. So I hope you tell all your people you're supporting a U.S. designated terrorist
Are
organization.
you threatening me right now?
I am not threatening you. You're supporting terrorists. You're supporting the genocide of Jews. You're supporting raping women. You're supporting killing babies and putting them in ovens, just like Hitler. I hope all of you know that.
Well, that was scenes from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, University of Mississippi, Rutgers, University of Michigan. Yeah, the SEC, the ACC, and the Big Ten all showing up, and they were displaying exactly what we need to see right now to sort of cleanse us from what Columbia and UCLA has been showing us, and George Washington here in D.C. So, Matt Foldi, I mean, you're the closest one of all of us to being in college. What do you think of this? Are you surprised, first of all, that this sort of emerged now finally from your guys, your pals, your bros?
I think you're right to point this out, because do you know how cool you have to be in the Jewish fraternity at U Chicago? I mean, really, like it's next level Chad status.
Oh, yeah. Oh, come on. Yeah, Matt, everybody knows that. You're in the Jewish fraternity at University of Chicago. You are the coolest guys on the planet.
You're the coolest guys. And listen, I think the good news here is that it really is these pro-American Chads versus these really sick freaks on the other side of this. But I actually am a little bit black-pilled on all of this because, and Larry, you just said it, we counted 4 or 5 campuses where normal people are trying to push back against these illegal Palestinian tent cities. And on the flip side, you can basically count on 2 hands the number of colleges in America where these illegal Palestinian tent cities haven't cropped up. Now, most people in America obviously agree with these Chads saying, we want the American flag flown and not the Palestinian flag flown, but they are still the distinct minority on campus. That said, look at what happened at UNC. These people now have $500,000 to host the best frat party of all time. So people should take lessons from that. But unfortunately, it's going to take all of us, the cool kids like me, the nerds, like people who aren't on this panel, all of us together to push back against the terrorists. But the frat stars cannot do it alone.
Matt Foldi, I know that you've got an in to that $500,000 kegger. Could you put in a good word for me, please?
We should record from that party.
Oh, we do a live show, absolute live roundtable from the kegger.
That's a commitment.
I mean, if any of us are standing.
Yeah, exactly.
Gosh, Matt makes a bit of a point here, although I'm going to push back a little. All us normies are out there, and we're the majority, but haven't we all been so beaten down over the last couple of decades to not show our toxic masculinity, just keep our head down? And let's face it, in all of those campuses, the faculty, the administration, they've been supporting the students. So it takes a lot of courage to step up and defy all of them and push back against what you know is wrong.
That's the most remarkable thing, right? The remarkable part isn't that a bunch of frat boys stood up and said, actually, we're on the side of normal Americans and we're going to chant USA, USA against a bunch of pro-Hamas, protesters, right? It's that they're embodying an enormous portion of the country. I mean, how many times do you have frat boys and Republican politicians and progressive commentators on CNN agreeing that something is absolutely outrageous? These people are all on the same side against this tiny minority of pro-Hamas protesters on college campuses who, as you know, have plenty of university administrators and professors on their side. These guys are just representing a broad swath of the country in standing up and saying enough is enough. Kudos to them for having the courage and just saying enough is enough to stand up and do so on a college campus. But let's be clear, they're not just representing the frat boys of America. They're representing the vast majority of Americans who think these protests are absolutely ridiculous. And they side with America siding with Israel.
Well, and that's, of course, going to lead us to the political fallout here, which we'll get to in our next segment. I find this, what we're seeing right now, though, is beyond politics. This is a cultural moment, Robert. And listen, you served in a couple of administrations, and I think you go back even to the Reagan administration. Correct me if I'm wrong, but at that time, in the mid to late 80s, there was a cultural shift in America. That's why I'm sitting here, because I came of age as a young person when Ronald Reagan was president. That made a difference in my life.
Yeah, there's no question. You're right, Larry. Look, this is simply a refreshing memory that traditional Americans are probably still the majority out there, and there are a few people who are speaking up for it. I mean, it's ironic that we're talking about this. Really, I did work in the Reagan White House, but I also ran the fraternity system at Dartmouth just after Animal House, and the irony is that these kids who are stepping up right now, I am sure that professors will look askance at them when they get back into the classroom. They're not towing the line for the administration in all these places, and the administration in all these places is liberal. So, my hat is off to them. And I think actually there's probably 10 for every one that actually spoke up. And this is really America speaking up. I mean, at the end of the day, we have been cowed, as you said a moment ago, Larry. We have been sort of beaten around the head and ears. And we have to remember Edmund Burke, very simple. All it takes for evil to prevail is good people to do nothing. Well, these fraternity guys are saying, no, I'm not going to sit back and do nothing. I'm not going to say you can advocate for Hamas in the middle of my Dartmouth green. No, I'm not with that.
Matt, as you start to see social media and the coverage of what we're talking about here with the frat chads, I think you call them, has social media responded? People that are Gen Z, people who are in college or just out of college, are they loving this as well outside of the college campus?
Well, I think what's important is that this has really reached the normie crowd. My UChicago group chat is filled, including some liberals, is filled with memes just dunking on these people. Now, I'm not going to pretend that is representative of anyone outside of my friends from college, but it is worth remembering what we're dunking on here. At UChicago, which I'm normally complimentary of, these people are pretending, this illegal Palestinian tent city, they're pretending to be war refugees. They're asking for food. They're asking for HIV tests. I don't know what's going on in this encampment. But the hilarious thing is they can walk 4 blocks to a CVS. They're just lazy people. But I think that normal people are understanding that, it's not just that these people are anti-Israel, they're anti-America.
I believe Matthew Foldi, wearing a bolo tie, just included himself in the normies category, which we're going to have to take. You know what? I'm going to let Robert and Akash chime in on that. Is he allowed to do that, gentlemen?
Hey, this is a free country. He can do whatever he likes. I will say, I just want to remind people that civil disobedience is not constitutionally protected free speech. That's a fact under Supreme Court precedent. And uncivil disobedience, the commission of crimes, is nothing more than being a criminal.
And if you think about it, though, this is exactly the most Palestinian way to operate. It is to do illegal things and then whine when there are consequences.
Yeah, it's a great point. They're let that be the last word. They're living up to the keffiyehs that they're all wearing during these protests, for sure. So what's the political fallout of these campus encampments that we've seen, and finally the police moving in on many of these cities? Well, I can tell you that in one case, University of Alabama, both the pro-Hamas protesters and the pro-Israel protesters, they did find one thing they could agree on. Take a look. Yes, that's right. The unmistakable chant of "Let's go, Brandon." So we'll start with you, Akash. Joe Biden is definitely harmed by this politically. That's why they dragged him out to finally make a statement yesterday, after all was said and done, a little too late. But he's feeling the pressure not just from the normies, as we've been saying, but also from the left. I mean, he tried to play it so he could please Dearborn, and it turns out he's not pleasing anyone.
No, that's exactly right. That's why he waited so long to say anything about this. It's not just that he can't complete a sentence normally, it's that he didn't know what to say because he is hamstrung by fear, because his administration is run by radical progressives, right? These young, woke, far left staffers who agree and applaud these pro-Hamas protesters when, again, the vast majority of Americans have absolutely no patience for this stuff and they don't support it. And so he's not only annoying the vast majority of Americans who oppose this stuff. He's now, of course, also angering his progressive base when he tries this both sides equivocation thing. The speech he gave just the other day, I thought was an absolute embarrassment. He's bringing in other forms of discrimination and other victim groups and things like that. He can't just clearly come out and say point blank anti-Semitism is bad, Hamas is bad. That's absolutely ridiculous, frankly, that he can't just say that. And I think if he were willing to do so, it would cause him far less political harm than what he's facing right now.
Yeah, you're right. And Robert, this is the same week where Donald Trump said, look, at the way things are going right now, I don't see how a two-state solution is possible. One state, and that one state would be, the one legitimate state, Israel, who belongs to be there. It's their nation. And that's why I want to bring you into this, because you've worked in the State Department in the past. The thing about these protests and why it really hurts Biden is that it's happening because of a larger failure across the entire Middle Eastern region, thanks to the Biden agenda there.
Yeah, look, foreign policy is a complete disaster under this administration. I spent time, there are 22 countries in the Middle East, and I've been to most of them, not to Iran. But this administration, as I think Robert Gates said, makes every single decision wrong. And what they really do is they show up to the party late, they're reactionary, they're not proactive, and they invariably get it wrong. Afghanistan, and I mean, just pick your poison. I mean, Iran and appeasement, and triggering the terrorist activities across and inviting Russia into Ukraine. It's really a walking, talking disaster. And I think the average American, to be honest, I don't think the average American is a pessimist. I think they look at the Middle East and they say, with mature leadership of the kind that Reagan provided, and frankly, even Jimmy Carter at one point relative to the Middle East provided, you can get progress. But just picking sides and then just pretending it's some kind of a ping pong game. Biden is really not up to the job of anything. I mean, and he's lacking in the basic maturity required. Never mind the senility part. He's basically not able to understand the stakes that are afoot here. And every time he talks, you just learn once more that the guy is just not competent. He's an empty chair.
Yeah, and I believe Robert Gates' direct quote was, Joe Biden has been wrong about every major foreign policy issue his entire career. That goes back to Vietnam, of course. And Matt, I don't understand how Joe Biden doesn't make a daily statement to the media, the world media, that is very simple. We don't do anything about this issue in the Middle East until our hostages are brought home. Release the hostages. Bring them all home before we talk about anything else. But I've hardly heard him mention the hostages ever.
It's actually the opposite. He is more eager to bring in Gazans to America than he is to bring the Americans in Gaza back. And that's kind of where they're putting their energy. But think about it this way. I mean, Biden has been basically a terrorist best friend for decades. 13 years ago yesterday, we got bin Laden, right? And who opposed that? Joe Biden. What does he do? His first year in office, he says to the Taliban, you're legitimate now. Here's all of Afghanistan. Here's, first world army. And turn your country into a terrorist training ground. And now we're seeing President Biden and college presidents make the same mistakes. They're trying to appease terrorists. And that's what's going on in these colleges. They're terrorizing everyone. And that's, of course, what's going on in the Middle East. But at this point, it's kind of too late. And you see this politically for Joe Biden, right? The left, these insane people, are not down with him because they hilariously think that he's too pro-Israel. But I think this, you can look at this in one of two ways for him in November. Is it like 2016, right, where the left was so anti-Hillary that a couple tens of thousands of votes for Jill Stein helped elect Donald Trump? Or is it like 2020, where this is all just kafia cosplay? They don't actually care about any of this. They just don't want to have finals, which is also very possible. And they say, whatever, we hate Trump so much, we'll vote for Biden, even though we're saying that he is supporting genocide, which is, of course, laughably false. But that's, I think, those are the two paths for him politically. But the mistake he made was thinking that, hey, if you give them a little bit, right? If you give a Palestinian activist a cookie, you're making a big mistake.
Kafia cosplay is brilliant, and I'm going to steal that, Matt Foldi, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Look, Larry, you can plagiarize me like Joe Biden.
Gosh, listen, Americans for Prosperity, you guys are mobilized and set up in so many states around the country, and I know in the Midwest, you have a strong presence there. This whole play for Dearborn, for this one Rashida Tlaib district outside of Detroit, Michigan, I understand there's a lot of votes there, But guess what? There's a lot of Jewish votes, not just in Michigan, Birmingham, Bloomfield Hills, Novi, Livonia. There's also a lot of Jewish votes and just Americans who might not be Jewish, but love the state of Israel and are aligned with the state of Israel. This is vastly unpopular. I think the last poll was 4 out of 5 Americans support the Netanyahu government. That's stronger the support than Bibi has in Israel. So this play for the radical extreme of Rashida Tlaib's district, could this be a boomerang for Joe Biden, that he's completely misplayed it?
There's no question about it. Look, we're the largest conservative activist organization in the country. And it reminds me of the Tea Party days when Americans for Prosperity expanded enormously with our activist base, because you had people who had never previously identified with the cause of the day joining up with conservatives, right? That's exactly what happened in the Tea Party wave. You had people who really had, no other involvement in politics, that were upset about federal spending and the bailouts and things like that. Today, it's the same thing, where you have what was once just kind of a conservative right versus left political dynamic. You've got normal people who may not agree on other issues say the progressive left is way out of whack on this issue. Biden is beholden to them. I can't stand this stuff. I'm going to be a lot more open to voting Republican or becoming a conservative than I ever have. And it's all because he's chasing after this far left progressive audience, whether it's on this Palestinian issue or it's on other issues. He's completely beholden to the radical progressives, and it's turning Americans of all stripes away from him otherwise, whether it's swing voters, suburban voters, other minority voters, what have you. The president just simply has terrible political instincts, and I think the conservative movement and the Republican Party stand to gain from it if we play our cards right.
Yeah, and Robert, from an AMAC perspective, American Association of Mature American Citizens, I've got to think this is wildly unpopular too. Most people I know that are 55 and older, they're on the side of Israel, always have been, because we're old enough to remember what Intifada looks like. We remember Yasser Arafat. I mean, he's on the wrong side of this issue in such a brazen way.
You're absolutely right. I would go a step beyond everybody else talking here, because I think this is devastating for him. AMAC does represent the conservatives over the age of 50, sort of the opposite side of the AARP world. And there are millions of AMAC members and tens of thousands just in the state I'm in here. And they are, I wouldn't say apoplectic, they're mature, but they look at this and they say, what in God's name is in your mind? I was just at a convention the other day, and I listened to Susan Collins talk, interestingly, very moderate, even liberal Republican, perhaps one of the most liberal in the Senate. And she was railing on progressives. And you have to say to yourself, look, when the moderates start to go after the progressives and Joe Biden supports the progressives, your whole boat is sliding sideways. And I think this is what's going on with Joe Biden. He has become the appeasement president. He appeases Iran, Russia, China, and now Hamas. And there's no room for it.
The appeasement president will have that be the last word, because it's a damn good one. Yeah, this president finally said something yesterday, but it was only after the dirty work was done, after the cops moved in and actually showed leadership, and the governors of those states showed leadership. Would have been great if a week ago he had said, rule of law, this cannot stand. I'm calling on these governors to do something about it. Republican governors did something about it, but the Democrat governors, they waited, they heard nothing. Finally, they did something, and then Joe Biden leading from behind. It's going to hurt him big time politically. Last week, the Biden administration finally answered the burning question, what is a woman? And the answer is clearly a man who wants to dress up like a woman. And they're putting it in law. Title IX has been rewritten now. Richard Nixon would be turning over in his grave if he knew what they did to Title IX. Well, the states are pushing back. There's brand new lawsuits suing the Biden administration. Some states, their governors have just said, forget it. We're ignoring these new Title IX rules. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the first female governor to speak up about this in Arkansas, she took it one step further. Take a look.
If Biden gets his way, female college students will shower and change next to male college students. Referring to someone using biologically correct pronouns will get you hauled in front of a disciplinary board for harassment. And scholarships previously reserved for women will now be open to anyone claiming to be a woman. My message to Joe Biden and the federal government is that we will not comply. In a moment, I'll sign an executive order reiterating our laws and instructing our educational institutions and the Arkansas Department of Education to follow them. And if President Biden threatens our state with loss of educational funding because we refuse to go along with his election year pandering, Arkansas will take the federal government to court. That's because this issue goes far beyond a single locker room or a missed scholarship. The truth is important. Biology is important. The differences between men and women are important. Title IX was created because of those fundamental truths, and for half a century has allowed women and girls to access colleges, sports, and scholarships that were previously unavailable. We won't let Biden threaten that, and we certainly will not let him erase our existence as women.
Brilliant stuff, and well said. And she's very, to the point. She learned the hard way under fire in the White House briefing room. So, Robert, this issue, I think, could very well be an important political issue, because the one constituency Biden does well with that Trump needs help with are those suburban moms. And this speaks directly to them and their daughters, I think.
Larry, as someone who has a daughter and of that age bracket, I will tell you right now that it is an absurdity that we have to have governors signing executive orders saying that a boy is a boy and a girl is a girl. It is also an absurdity that you have an administration, a Biden administration, so full of leftists that they are legalizing something that 10 years ago was a felony, having a man show up in a girl's locker room naked. Bottom line here is this will not stand. This is a huge wedge issue. This is an issue where 95% of the American people in the quiet of the night think this is dead wrong. Women fought for 50 years, more than 50 actually, to get Title IX, and that is a defense of women, not a defense of men who want to be women. So look, we have people who have counseling for things like agoraphobia and claustrophobia, and being something that you're not and thinking you are, well, you need some counseling. But at the end of the day, you can be compassionate to those people without eviscerating the rights that women fought for 50 years to have. And look, the Republican Party is now a pro-woman, pro-girl party, and the Democrat Party is an anti-girl party. And if there is not if a Democrat does not stand up for girls, they're on the wrong side of history.
Well, and Akash, from an Americans for Prosperity perspective, I find this to be an issue of the Constitution, an issue of states being able to determine these things. Sarah Huckabee Sanders is the governor of Arkansas, and she won overwhelmingly, and the people of Arkansas, they wouldn't want something like this. If this works for Gavin Newsom in California, fine. But rewriting Title IX and mandating this across the board, that flies in the face of what our country's supposed to be about.
No, you're exactly right. I think there's actually two constitutional issues here, the substance of it aside. I think as conservatives, we're clear where we are on the substance. It's one, if to the extent this is an education policy, it is, as you mentioned, should be dealt with by the states. To the extent that it involves federal law, there is zero chance that the executive branch alone has the authority in the Constitution to just go and do something this outrageous, this extreme, and frankly, this important. This should be a question for Congress, right? If we're going to completely rewrite civil rights law in this manner, Congress is the body that should be doing that. But this administration, on issue after issue after issue, has abused its executive authority, has overstepped the power vested in it by Congress, and frankly rammed its progressive agenda down the throats of the American people by executive fiat when Congress has refused to do so, and when they know that their agenda is unpopular, again, all because they're vote pandering in an election year to their progressive base. That's ultimately what all these things come down to, and it's an absolute affront, not just to common sense, but to our constitutional system of government as well.
Matt Foldi, of course, I want to hear you chime in on this, but in addition to your opinion on the issue at hand, also comment on the importance of the visuals. You understand how stories need to be communicated to voters, to the American people, whether it's in traditional media or social media. Having that young woman standing next to her, Riley Gaines, who has become such a symbol of fairness for women in sports, she didn't even have to say anything, but she's so recognizable now that lends to sort of the popularity of this issue, I think, for Republican governors like Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Yeah, I agree about this. And it's interesting, two things, from the Biden standpoint and from the Sarah Huckabee Sanders standpoint. Think about it from the Biden standpoint in terms of your point about optics. When is he doing this? When is he pushing these policies on colleges? As colleges are rioting for jihad, I call this the DEI intifada that we're seeing on campuses. So at a time when Jews are being banned by students and faculty from campuses, the Biden administration is saying, we care more about punishing someone like Riley Gaines than we do about punishing people who are illegally banning students from attending colleges that they spend way too much money to attend. I agree, obviously, then on the Sarah Huckabee Sanders side, brilliant move, of course, to have Riley Gaines there. And I think this fits into a broader thing that we're seeing out of Arkansas, a state I pay attention to because my grandma's from there. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders has been able to do a lot while Congress has sort of not really done much, including things on China buying land, not being allowed to do that in Arkansas anymore. This is always the advantage that governors have over people in the federal government, is that they run the show, unless some Democrats are trying to put obstacles in their way. And so she's been able to rack up conservative win after conservative win after conservative win. And then kind of to tie it all back together, it's interesting. Title IX is under siege by Biden, and Title VI is under siege by colleges this week. It's a bad week to be a title. And Northwestern, for example, is being sued for violating Title VI because it took the wrong lesson. It caved to these illegal Palestinian protesters and said, we are creating scholarships specifically for Palestinians, which could not be more illegal if Northwestern tried. This makes sense because if they were smart at law, they would go to the University of Chicago.
I'll give myself the last word on this one, since you gentlemen were so brilliant, frankly, and textured with your responses. I'll just say this. In my lifetime, at least in the last 15 years, I've seen two great political movements born in this country, both from the conservative side of the equation. The Tea Party movement, which ultimately coalesced around the Trump presidency in 2016, shocking the world, and the Parents at School Board movement. And both of those movements had something in common. American citizens, regardless of what their party registration was up until that point, they were sick and tired. They were done. They were finally going to say something. And the school board parent movement, it coalesces around an issue like this. Joe Biden and the Democrats are on the wrong side of it. And when there's a new, exciting, enthusiastic, well-formed political movement in this country, you do not want to be on the wrong side of it. You know, I remember an old rumor. It could be true. It could be folklore. It could be apocryphal. But apparently Donald Trump hired a publicist for the sole purpose of paying whatever he had to pay to get on the cover of Time magazine. And well, gone are those days, because he's now graced the cover of Time magazine 35 times. And there he is again this week. Time magazine with an exclusive interview of Donald Trump. Pretty dramatic photograph. And of course, the headline of the story, if he wins. And they basically walk through in a very thorough way what a second Trump presidency might look like. Of course, the reaction to this story has been expected from the media, from the left, from the right. But if you put aside all of the histrionics and the reaction, how dare Time magazine platform this man? If you actually look at what he's saying, he's ready to go. And Akash, I want to start with you, because on the issue of immigration, obviously, this is going to be a major issue for him and for the voters. And he is already moving forward with ideas on how to not just secure the border, but yes, move to deport all of those who have come in the recent years under Joe Biden. Is that a winning message, number one? Is it even feasible?
Well, I think securing the border is certainly a winning message. Americans for Prosperity just rolled out new polling, a new immigration platform, what we're calling the 4 pillars of immigration. Of course, Pillar 1 is securing our borders and ports. That's a common sense position at any time. It's particularly popular right now, given the chaos that we're seeing on the southern border. But, to your point, if anyone has kind of the broad-based credibility on the right of center for comprehensive, constructive immigration reform that both secures the border, punishes those who break the law, but reforms the system in a way that's productive for our country and helps grow our country and our economy, it may be President Trump coming in. And so it's good to see him obviously prioritizing this issue, but we're going to have to be realistic in what we're talking about as far as what's possible, what kind of authority it's going to take, how much it's going to cost, and ultimately how it leaves our country and our economy. And does it leave us in a better position, in a more pro-growth position, in a way that's going to make the American people more prosperous? I think these are important questions, and it's something that the Republican Party should be prioritizing going into next year.
Well, that's a worthy debate to have, and frankly, one that should be part of the presidential election. But instead, Robert Charles, what we had from Joe Biden this week was calling our allies, countries like Japan and India, xenophobic because they don't have the same kind of immigration policies that we have. So we're looking at real two polar opposites approaching here.
Yeah, very seldom do you have a president who's already a has-been before he's even removed. I think when Trump wins, I think you're going to see something really transformational. Having worked in the Reagan White House, I will tell you that once Reagan got a second term, a lot of things happened. He wasn't going to run again. So a lot of things happened that couldn't otherwise. I would not be at all surprised, not only to see the border secured, to see the economy restabilized, inflation down, energy sector back up again, interest rates falling because inflation is down, no more missiles out of Korea, Russia backing off, China backing off, Middle East a little more front and center in a constructive way. But actually, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see Trump when he wins, and I think he will, potentially as strongly as Reagan did the second cycle. People are just distressed beyond belief right now. But I think if, you could see a czar dedicated to literally axing half a dozen federal agencies. You could see the deep state being fundamentally dismantled. And I think, you only get one shot at this in a second term, and you're not running again. So if he picks a good vice president and they are conscientious about restoring fiscal responsibility and integrity to government, I think we could be all very happy with what happens.
The one-term YOLO presidency. Could he bring in President Milei from Argentina as an outside consultant on killing those departments of the federal government? What do you think, Matt?
Honestly, he could do a lot worse than that. But I think that kind of what you're talking about with this timepiece, it fits into a broader thing that I was thinking about, not only because I just wrote a piece about this, but there's this common trope on the left of the walls are closing in on Trump that we mock because they haven't yet closed in on Trump. And it I think turns more into the meme of he can't keep getting away with this. And it's curious, right now, I feel like Trump's self-proclaimed enemies are trying to do whatever they can to help him get elected. And I think one of the examples you see with this is the hysterical and deranged reaction to a fairly normal piece. This was not a Trump piece from Time, the magazine that, of course, made Adolf Hitler its 1938 Person of the Year. Fairly normal interview, but that apparently is too much. You have these basically insane people like Nicole Wallace saying, I may not have a show. I didn't even realize she still had a show. If Trump wins, there may not be a White House Correspondents' Dinner next year. Honestly, that would be amazing. And then you have, as we discussed, these Palestinian illegal tent cities making Trump and law and order sound really good right now. And then, of course, you have all of these cases that may go legally very badly for him. But I think politically, he's been able to turn them fully to his advantage in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and Matt, if I can follow up with you, because it wasn't just about immigration here. They also talked about abortion and his position that there should be no federal issue on this. We got rid of Roe v. Wade for a reason. It should be in the hands of the states. And that's seen as kind of a more moderate position right now from a pro-life perspective. How is this resonating, this sort of Trump threat? It's sort of his third act now, right? He's not a candidate for president. He's not a president. He's now sort of, in a weird way, kind of reinvented here, coming back in, trying to restore order. It's like when Winston Churchill finally came back to be prime minister again.
Yeah, or when Nixon came back, a lot of America, obviously, Bill Clinton, obviously in 92 was the comeback kid. People like that narrative a lot. But I think that for the left, that's really the only saving grace they have electorally is fear mongering on abortion to an absolutely insane level. I wrote about this last week. Gavin Newsom is running ads in Alabama because Gavin Newsom will be an unemployed loser in 2026, maybe auditioning for Patrick Bateman in The New American Psycho, which I think he would excel at. But he's running ads in Alabama about how cops are arresting women trying to leave. That's what Democrats are resorting to. It's, if it works, that's very unfortunate.
He does use the apricot exfoliant, doesn't he, to sort of really get that glow going?
I'm sure he does. He spends more time on his hair than he spends governing California.
Yes, he is Governor Hair Gel. Akash touched briefly in this article from Time Magazine, and that's because I think Time Magazine is not trying to hurt Joe Biden, was the economy. And let's face it is the economy, stupid. Inflation's still outrageous and through the roof, and no plan to get under control. Of course, the housing market is now screwed up because the interest rates are high to offset the inflation. There's no answers coming from Democrats. In a weird way, even though inflation is so big and so present on voters' minds, it's not really a big topic of conversation right now amongst the two candidates.
It's not, but I think it will become because they have no choice but to talk about this. Inflation has been, and will continue to be issue number one on the minds of the American voter, and with good reason. None of this other stuff matters if you're struggling to make ends meet, and tens of millions of Americans are struggling to make ends meet. It should come as no surprise that Joe Biden's allies in the mainstream media don't want to talk about the economy because Bidenomics has been an abject failure. The other people that know that Bidenomics has been an abject failure are Joe Biden, his administration. He used that phrase Bidenomics almost 100 times last fall to the end of last year. He has used it fewer than 5 times this year after saying he wanted to own the phrase. And the best place to go learn about Joe Biden's record on the economy, Bidenomics.com, which is a domain owned by Americans for Prosperity, where we are fact checking his claims on the economy. There's a reason, as Foldi pointed out, they want to run on Dobbs and democracy and not, in fact, the issues that the American people are screaming that they care about the most, which are the economy and immigration. I think if Republicans stay focused on those 2 issues, make this a referendum on Joe Biden's track record and the dozens of crises created under his watch, they're going to do quite well. I think his administration has been an abject failure. Speaker Johnson, congressional Republican leaders are doing a good job of drawing that contrast. I think that's where the winning message is. That's what AFP is going to be doing. We're launching a nationwide bus tour holding President Biden and the Democrats who voted for his agenda accountable with 500 events all across this country, because that's the message Americans need to hear from conservatives, is that the Democrats are failing you and there is a better path forward on the things you care about most.
I love the makeup of our panel this week because we got a boomer, we got Gen X, we got millennial, and we got a Zoomer down there from Gen Z. So we all kind of have our perspectives on it. So I'm going to turn to the boomer, Robert Charles, and I say that affectionately, by the way. You mentioned Jimmy Carter earlier, and Donald Trump's race for the presidency for his second term now, interrupted by Biden. It's very much the same messaging, if you think about it, from the Middle East to the economy to sort of America's malaise. This really is Reagan running against Carter for his first term.
You know, I really think that's true. And even if you don't get to 84, where Reagan won 49 states, in 1980, you'll remember, Larry, that everybody thought they claimed that Reagan was going to bring Armageddon. They threw everything they could think of at him, and none of it stuck. And he won 58% of the vote. You know, I would tell you that bottom line is Time Magazine is probably on the way out, just like Life Magazine once was, and we don't talk about it anymore. I think they're looking for a cover that's going to give them some attention. And, it won't be too long now before Time will be looking to be on the cover of Trump Magazine. I think bottom line is the American people are fed up. I was just, again, at a convention here in Maine watching for AMAC. AMAC's principles ricocheted all over the place, just as some of our other panelist groups are. They are doing boot camp for boomers all over this country. Again, fastest growing organization for those over the age of 50. And why? Because they're going to knock off some of these blue legislatures. They're going to do what happened in Kentucky, where you had 2 blue legislative bodies, and now they're both supermajorities red. I think that could happen in Maine. It could happen in states all over the country, on top of Trump ultimately being able to say, hey, you know what, grown-ups, we're gonna be grown-ups again, and we're gonna put foreign policy back in order, the economy back in order, the energy sector back in order, the border back in order. And what American doesn't want that?
I just vaguely remember the 1980 election. Okay, I'm the Gen Xer here. I was watching Gilligan's Island reruns, but I was living in Detroit at the time, and the convention was in Detroit, so I do remember that part of it. But
Larry,
a little bit of slack there. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
I just want to say, I'll tie it all together. I was already talking about how Biden is embracing MAGA. He wants to make America Gaza again. And then to the point on the boomers, I guess Trump wants to MAGA, make America grown up again.
There it is. Last word, Matt Foldi. Those little young whippersnappers always want to get the last word. Great roundtable. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll see you next time.